there's going to be a bit of a swing to winter barley this year, I think. There's going to be certainly a swing towards sowing in September rather than October. And for me, the BYDV genetic varieties come into play. So I would say the two varieties that we have on the market that are most widely available are Arcade, which is a 2-row barley with BYDV tolerance. It's going to be top of the list, and it's going to be the most popular variety in autumn 2025 because of its yield, its disease resistance, grain size, and the BYDV together.
The early harvest and good weather that followed has allowed farmers to plant oilseed rape in good time. An early start can help growers to rethink rotations, enabling time to choose the right crop and variety for each field. With margins tighter than ever, every decision counts. Differences between crops and even between varieties within the same crop can have a big impact on overall profitability. Getting those choices right could be key to a successful season. You're listening to the latest episode of the Tillage Edge with me, Michael Hennessy. We really appreciate it if you could listen, follow, and give us a review on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts from. In today's episode, the second in our series on varieties from the recent Trade Open days, I caught up with Tim O'Donovan at the Seedtech Open Day to chat about the varieties they have on offer for this year. I started by asking Tim how some popular varieties are holding up against yellow rust and how worried farmers should be about yellow rust for next season.
This yellow rust issue arose, I would have heard about it first kind of late February, early March, and then it became quite widespread in the UK, especially in the area north of the Humber, up as far as the Tweed in Scotland. And they kind of highlighted that there was a breakdown to varieties that were previously a 8 or a 9 for rust. To be honest, in Seedtech, our own trial site in Waterford, we didn't see yellow rust until 2 weeks ago. When it came in, it followed the same pattern as it has done in the north of the country. So some of the newer varieties seem to be breaking down to it. On our own side of it, I suppose, Michael, the variety that we weren't expecting to see yellow rust in this year was Champion. It seems to have picked up a bit of it. Dawson certainly has a bit of it as well. And some of the newer lines that aren't on the recommended list yet. Our own new wheat for 25 is a variety called KWS Equip. We have limited amount of seed only available of it. It doesn't seem to have the yellow rust at the moment. And as I was saying, at the open day, it's an evolving situation, this yellow rust. I think people, septoria is our main challenge always in Ireland. The chemistry that's there to control yellow rust is quite comprehensive. And from what we've seen so far, where people have applied chemistry to control yellow rust, it seems to be something that is, fairly well taken care of, I would have said in general. I wouldn't be overly worried about yellow rust next spring because sometimes these new races of rust, they may have a fitness penalty, they may not last the winter. That we won't know until next year. And often the weather does not actually is conducive to yellow rust in Ireland. So I would think, based on what I've seen so far, with good chemistry, I think it'll be well controlled. Some of the newer varieties, I think people would want to just keep an eye on the ratings that the Department of Agriculture give them because they may be expecting a variety to be a 7 or an 8 or a 9, and it may be giving a rating by the department of a 4 or 5 or 6. And if that's the case, I think a T0 is appropriate. And certainly there will be some amount of re-ranking of varieties on the recommended list that was published last autumn. I would see some varieties moving from their 8 or 9 at the moment back to a kind of a 5 or a 6, and certainly a T0 fungicide is be appropriate in those varieties.
There's, in terms of overall seed, Tim, from your side of the house, Graham Champion was going to be making up a pretty large proportion of the seed availability out there, will it?
Yeah, so Graham Champion, Fitzroy and Dawson, I would have said, will be the foremost available varieties in Ireland based on the multiplication areas. I mean, we have a bit to go yet to harvest and all the rest of it, but at the moment, they're the four main varieties. All the other varieties that are out there, they're kind of single digit numbers, 1 to 3% of the area of seed multiplication. So that generally indicates that a breeder or breeding agent is actually just in the multiplication stage. And that's where we are with our equip, Michael. We're in the multiplication stage. We've 3% of seed available, but it'll be mainly for multiplication.
Tell me a little bit more about Equip. It's a variety that is potential bread making, is it?
Yeah, so it's a Group 2 bread making variety in the UK. That's its status. Unfortunately, we don't test for bread making characteristics here anymore on our own recommended list, but we have undertaken some private tests in Seedtech, and it seems to have very good baking quality. It would be it wouldn't be surprised now for it to be a baking quality because its parents are Chevignon from France and Extase, which were the number one varieties in England and across Europe over the last 5 or 6 years. So very robust genetics in terms of disease. As I said, it doesn't seem to be affected by the new strains of yellow rust from what we've seen. It looks like it's going to be similar to Champion for its Septoria, and it looks like it's got very good grain quality, which would infer its sprouting resistance, KPH, Hagberg, all of those little things that sometimes growers are worried about. We don't expect there to be a problem with Equip in that regard.
In terms of growers selecting out the seed in terms of early versus later sown, for the ones that are there, what's your sequence of varieties in terms of the years it goes by?
Yeah, so at the moment, if we start with, Champion Graham, they're generally considered, Graham is a slow developer in the autumn into the early spring. Then it speeds up when it hits growth stage 32, and it actually ends up as a relatively quick to finish. Champion is a different type of variety. It grows quite robustly over the winter, builds up a lot of biomass, but because of its disease resistance, in terms of septoria and mildew, growers are quite happy to sow it relatively early. I wouldn't say it's an ultra early variety, Michael, to be honest now, but certainly Champion can be sown relatively early. Equip at the moment, because we don't know enough about it in terms of big volumes grown in Ireland, I would suggest it would be sown after Graham and Champion. Um, it is early to head out, but in terms of its speed over the winter and biomass, it will be tending towards the earlier side and the bigger biomass side. So look, unfortunately, we don't have this ultra early type of variety that we used to have in Clare, etc., years ago. Um, it just isn't there. A lot of the modern varieties, their yield potential is coming from the fact that they're building biomass over the winter in terms of tiller number, or they're actually quite quick to finish through the growing seasons in spring, the growing stages in spring. And that kind of gets them over these summer dry periods. And that's where they're getting their extra yield potential from.
Okay, just moving on to some of the other earlier sown crops. Oilseed rape, again, another impressive array of oilseed rape there on the trial site.
Yeah,
And there's a lot of varieties there, Tim, with a lot of genetic potential. I mean, there's a lot of, I suppose, problems being to a degree addressed within the genetics side of
yeah.
it. You might just run us down through a few bits and pieces in terms of the varieties you've available this year.
Yeah, so our main variety will be Aurelia and Aveyron. Two very, very reliable varieties. We're talking over half the market for the last number of years has been growing those two varieties. Farmers know them very well. We have excellent trial results to back up the on-farm performance. And I suppose, look, one of the things, Michael, we're always bringing new varieties to market, which we do each year. We have some new ones coming this year, but when we go and talk to people about moving away from Aurelia, especially, very hard to get people to move away from it because they're actually getting on so well with it. And that's also the similar story in the United Kingdom, in England, where the area rape is much larger than here. And Aurelia, again, will be the number one variety over there in terms of its market share. So farmers vote with their feet. If they have a variety like Aurelia that grows really well for them, it's not the tallest, it has excellent disease resistance, and it has all the bells and whistles in terms of its pod shatter, excuse me, in terms of its straw strength, in terms of its stability coming up to harvest. So I suppose, look, our main variety of the tree will be Aurelia, Averon will be a close second, and then Dart will be the third one. And Dart would be equal to Aurelia, in my opinion, only for the fact that it came to the market 3 years later. It's an extremely good offering of a variety, excellent in terms of disease, and it actually has an added advantage in that Dart flowers a little bit earlier than the other ones. So for people that are looking for a slightly earlier harvest on oilseed rape, Dart is one of the ones that would come in earliest.
You might tell me a little bit about the Beatrix, which is a Clearfield variety, and where you see that fitting into a particular farm.
5, 6, 7 years ago, Clearfield varieties were, up to 10% of the area on farm. But to be honest, all of the Clearfield varieties, and look, we're producing varieties for export of Clearfields, so we know the genetics very well, but they always carry a yield penalty, Michael, from what we've seen. And that's right across all the varieties of Clearfield that are on the market. You may have look at them on the UK list and say, God, they're only a small difference, but in Ireland, with higher yield potential, that difference multiplies up. So, from our experience, Beatrix, like again, it has the good pod shatter genes, it has the turn up yellows
Sorry,
resistance.
sorry, James. Go back to the yield. Go back to the yield for a second. Just where is it in comparison to the other ones? The 10%, 5% back, or where?
10 plus, Michael. Obviously, Beatrix isn't in the official trials. Most of the Clearfield varieties, if you look at their history, they get entered in 1 year, they perform at 90 or below on a recommended list trial, and then they drop out the second year. So Beatrix,
Sure.
with our private trials at Seedtech, it would be 10% lower yielding than the best conventional hybrid on the market.
But it still offers some of the other bits and pieces there in terms of pod shatter resistance and virus
Yes,
resistance and
yes.
the other few bits and pieces.
Look, in terms of the Clearfields, Michael, I would say they'd certainly require a robust fungicide program. Their resistance to light leaf spot in a challenging season, you'd see the differences very clearly between them and the market leaders such as Aurelia, Dart, Averon, etc. Um, in terms, and people might say, oh, they've got the pod shatter gene, Beatrix has it, but in terms of in Ireland at farm level, light leaf spot does as much on pod shatter as the pod shatter gene itself. So if you have good light leaf spot genetics, that is probably the most important thing in terms of maintaining the integrity of the pods coming up to harvest. The pod shatter genetics, look, it's nice to have. It certainly does something, but for me, light leaf spot is a more important trait to have.
Moving to winter barley, maybe Tim. There's a huge array of the same as oilseed rape, I suppose, array of winter barley in terms of 2 rows and 6 rows. Some being a bit earlier,
Yeah,
some being a bit later. In terms of all of the varieties that you have there, how would you sequence those out maybe on farm? Because look, I mean, they're all pretty good varieties. They
yeah.
all, they
So
all bring their own
it's
bits and pieces, you know.
Yeah, it's straightforward enough, Michael. For people, there's going to be a bit of a swing to winter barley this year, I think. There's going to be certainly a swing towards sowing in September rather than October. And for me, the BYDV genetic varieties come into play. So I would say the two varieties that we have on the market that are most widely available are Arcade, which is a 2 row barley with BYDV tolerance. It's, look, it's going to be top of the list and it's going to be the most popular variety in autumn 2025 because of its yield, its disease resistance, grain size, and the BYDV together. Um, the next most popular variety I would have said in the BYDV stable is Joyu. It's a 6 row. It's been on the market for a number of years. And what we find with Joyu is farmers grow it and they come back a second year and a third year and a fourth year because they're getting on well with it. It's short, it's stiff. Of all varieties in trial, Joyu is the one that'll be standing come harvest time because it has that extra added advantage in its draw strength. That can be an issue for some people, especially if it's in fields that they know that the fertility is in. Um, the third variety that I'll talk about, Michael, is the hybrids. We've got two on the market. The most widely available will be Canyon and Belfry. They've Belfry's been around for a long number of years and people are very, very happy with it. Canyon, 6 or 7 points higher yield than the Belfry, super quality grain. It's the first hybrid that we've had that has grain quality equal to Cassia. Okay, so it's a very, very unique hybrid in that regard and very good disease resistance, which people pay for when they're buying a hybrid variety. You're buying, the facility that you can sow 25 acres from a ton of seed. That's a very big consideration for people when they're planning areas and whatever else. Certainly in terms of the hybrid vigor over the winter, in the challenging conditions, the hybrids are the ones that are able to survive when the growing gets tough. And thirdly, then you're paying for disease resistance. So in springtime, when you're, maybe worried about some barley going off colour in terms of disease, the hybrids will be the ones that'll be the greenest and they'll be the most vigorous to grow. And people like to have that because it means they're not overly worried about applying PGRs, fungicides. They know if in dodgy conditions or cold conditions, the hybrid is the one that's able to survive more than others in terms of its getting a setback from the spray in the springtime.
Okay, certainly plenty of choice there, Tim. I
Yeah,
want to just finally finish up, maybe Tim, because we won't be able to get across everything. Might come back to you again, and maybe some of the other spring ones. But hybrid rye, it's gaining a little bit more year on year. It's incrementally
yeah,
kind of moving up, and there was certainly at the Oak Park Open Day this year, we had it on trial, and there's an awful lot of interest in it again.
yeah.
You, Seedtech, have two varieties there, and you might maybe describe just a little bit around those.
Yeah, so Teo and Eiger are the two varieties of rye that we have. I suppose, look, Michael, in fairness, we've kind of done most of the heavy lifting on hybrid rye over the last 10 years in terms of its development. What I would say to people, the most important thing with hybrid rye is to make sure to have an end user and they understand the market around that. Going out and sowing hybrid rye without speaking to your merchant is a foolhardy exercise. Okay. So that's the first thing. Teo has been around now for 4 years. It's probably 80% of the market in the country, maybe more. Um, It'll be again the most popular rye variety in autumn 2025. Eiger is its new competitor from us. It's a very, very solid performer in our trials. It's the highest yielding rye that we have in our trials for the last 3 years. So we said we'd bring a little bit to the market this year. Um, can't see much between them in the data sets except higher yield with the Iger. And for someone who's tried rye before and they're used to Teo, they won't be disappointed with the Iger. And we will have stock of both of those coming up to the 1st of August. Seed is arriving into us, and we would suggest people would delay sowing them until the middle of September. But rye has a very good agronomic story. And but again, just make sure the market is willing to take it from you. Don't grow it on spec because you may be disappointed.
For growers, Tim, who want to maybe try out a bit of rye under farms just to see how it's going to go, what sort of pack sizes does it come in?
It comes in, well, we'll have it in 6 hectare packs. We'll also have some smaller pack sizes as well, 1 to 2 hectares. But it really, most growers kind of are happy enough with the larger one because what you do the first year you're growing rye, Michael, and it's very straightforward. Pick a nice dry field that you're thinking of putting in barley or wheat into with a take-all risk. Put in your rye the end of September and you won't be disappointed. Okay. It's a very, very resilient crop to sow in September. It's it's got less effect of BYDV than wheat or barley, but I'm not saying it's tolerant. It's not, but it certainly has less effect. BYDV has a less effect on it. And secondly, and the most important thing is take all. Rye is very, very tolerant of take all. It doesn't seem to get it. It's able to overcome the problems there. And what I would say is it's the crop that for those dry fields with lower fertility at the end of the rotation, rye will outperform anything else.
Just in terms of practicality, it's a smaller seed, Tim. In terms of seed depth, is it a bit more critical to have it
Yeah,
Most of the surface, or
absolutely. And seed depth affects its tillering capacity too. We would recommend people to sow it at 2 centimeters or less, but it does need soil cover to germinate. One of the things with rye volunteers is that you don't get germination or sprouting on the head, even if the heads are on the ground. You have to cover rye with soil. So it's 2 centimeters is the sowing depth. That affects its germination capacity or its tillering capacity. So if you were to bury rye seed like at an inch to 2 inch, at 2 inches, it would be very slow to come up, would be very susceptible to slugs, and it certainly wouldn't tiller as much.
okay, brilliant. Listen, Tim, that's got some great practical advice there in the middle of all that. Really enjoyed your open day as normal, and yeah, looking forward to chatting again. Thanks, Tim.
Okay, thanks, Michael.
So that's it today, and my thanks to Tim for joining me on the podcast, and my compliments to Tim and Dennis Dunn, the Seedtech Trials Manager, and his team for an excellent event in Waterford this year. A date for your diary is the Teagasc Crops Forum, which takes place on Wednesday, September the 10th in the Killashee Hotel, Naas, County Kildare. We have a great lineup for you, including the latest on varieties and an update on yellow rust. We'll take a deeper dive into rye as a crop which holds plenty of promise for both tillage and livestock farms. So finally, if you enjoyed the podcast, then recommend it to a friend or colleague. And as always, rate, review and follow on Apple or Spotify so you never miss an episode. And for more information, go to teagasc.ie. I'm Michael Hennessy, thanks for listening. I'll be back next week with more tillage news and advice.